Hi guys, hope you all doing well. Welcome back to our channel. And in this video, I'm going to talk about Microsoft Zero Trust Security Strategies or Microsoft Zero Trust Security Principles. Okay. Now, if I talk about this keyword or if I talk about this phrase, which is Zero Trust Security, this concept or this strategy or this principle is not new. It's been there for a while. But all these security organizations or all these companies or all these service providers who have security solutions, they are investing like anything to make sure that you attain a state wherein you can actively say that, yes, my enterprise is now adhering to zero trust architecture. Okay, and that's the reason if you'll go ahead and check for the documentation that's available by different vendors, you will find ample amount of information. Okay, now this website is obviously Microsoft's website, wherein you can see there is a lot more information which is moreover related to what is zero trust, what is zero trust principles, how zero trust is defined in a nutshell. But the same concept gets applied to different other vendors as well. Now this is basically a strategy or a principle guideline that you can follow to make sure all the six digital estates of your enterprise are secured. Now, when I say six digital estate, I specifically mean identities, endpoints, data, applications, infrastructure, and network. Okay. Now, before I go ahead and start explaining Microsoft Zero Trust Security Architecture or Zero Trust Security Principles, let's take a step back and understand why we reached a state wherein we need solutions that can adhere to Zero Trust architecture altogether. Okay, so if I talk about the traditional systems or the traditional architecture, we had dedicated users, dedicated devices, and then these users are using dedicated devices to access certain applications inside the corporate network, right? This is what was happening traditionally, and all the security strategies that we were defining, or all the security model or architecture that we are defining for our enterprise, was majorly falling into the category of information security systems, right? And what was the case with this kind of architecture, that the entities were limited. So that's the reason why security controls are also very confined or limited, or the security strategies were not that mature. And the attacks were also not that mature compared to what is happening as of now when we talk about the cybersecurity space. Okay. And there was one more concept, or there was one more strategy that was actively followed by many of the enterprises, and that was basically blocking the resources which are known to them, right? Now, what do I mean by this? That apart from allowing all the internal websites or some of the applications on an endpoint, I'm actually going to block some of the websites as well, right? Now, the major challenge with this kind of security strategy was that you will not be able to cater the unknown sources, right? Maybe there is a website that exists and I'm not aware about that. And I have not added that website as a blocked resource from my internal network. And let's assume one of the user lands up to that particular website, malicious code gets inside to an endpoint, and that's it. That's all required for an adversary, for an attacker to compromise your infrastructure, or at least begin with compromising your infrastructure or your enterprise, right? But now let's talk about how we have transitioned from information security system to a cyber security information system, right? If we talk about the current architecture, and let's start from identity itself. Okay, if I talk about identity, the concept of user does not exist anymore, right? We have employees, we have customers, we have vendors, And in a nutshell, somewhere or the other, we are doing identity management for them as well, right? We are inviting our customers, we are inviting our vendors to access resources that are protected by my Azure Active Directory, right? Now, if I talk about the identity scope itself, there are basically two kind of categories: the internal identities and the external identities, right? Now, this is just one aspect in terms of thinking how you should improve the security, as you are covering only one digital state as of now, and that is the first one, which is the identity, right? Now, things will get complex as we move on towards other digital states, right? We have two kind of categories when it comes to identities. But again, any of these users can use any type of device. It can be a trusted device that is known to your enterprise. It can be a personal PC that belongs to a user, or it can be a mobile device, right? This not get stopped here, or this is not something which is getting ended here. The next layer of complication is the applications, right? There are certain applications which are known to your enterprise, but we all know what role shadow IT discovery plays when it comes to data exfiltration, right? Users may be using some applications which are either not known to your enterprise, but again, they are doing some activities intentionally or unintentionally to perform any activities which are moreover related to data exfiltration, right? And think about like this. The moment you only combine these three digital states in terms of defining security policies, think about the different personas, think about the different use case that you have to keep in mind. Okay, so if I talk about the first use case itself, let's say wherein a user is using a trusted device, but he may be accessing an application which falls under the category of shadow IT, right? At this particular stage, you may be worried about the third digital state, which is the application, that how I should control what kind of application should be accessed on a particular endpoint that belongs to my enterprise, right? The moment we move to another use case wherein now any of these users can use their personal PC and can access the applications which are actually approved. That means either OneDrive or Exchange. Now, as a user, if I'm working from home and I'm using my personal PC, what are the security policies that you can have, or what are the policies that you can implement, making sure that I should not be able to download any confidential information? Or if the data exists in my device, it stays protected. How you're going to manage the authentication process on my device, which is not trusted. Whether your security solution or whether your identity and access management solution has the capability to check the device state or not. Okay. These things will get more complex if I'll talk about the third use case, the mobile device. We all know the kind of variety or the kind of versions which are there when we talk about platforms like iOS or Android, right? When we talk about mobile devices and the kind of applications which are available. Now, your user can use any application. It may not be approved by your enterprise, but again, they are using them to access the enterprise data because it may be stored locally on that particular device without any encryption, right? So again, in this particular case, if I talk about, there are three different security aspects that you have to keep in mind. The first one is the user identity on the mobile device. The second one, the application which is used to access the corporate data. And third, the device state itself, whether there is any malicious content that exists on that particular device, whether that device is a jailbroken device or not. Okay. And if I talk about the next step, it may go up to, securing all the other aspects, likewise the network, right? Or likewise the infrastructure. Now, obviously, since most of the enterprises are hybrid, right? It's not a condition wherein all the applications that your users are using will be cloud native applications, and they have security model driven for cloud native environments, right? You will have hybrid applications, right? Some of them are on-prem, some of them are basically available in the cloud. Now the question comes how you are going to cater or how you're going to have security policies for the infrastructure that you have or for the network that is required for your infrastructure to run. Okay. And the last and the most important layer or the last or the most important state is the data itself, right? We all know that the data is the new asset for every enterprise, and it is utmost important for every enterprise to make sure the data is secured in each and every aspect, right? So this is how we have actually transitioned from an information security system to a cyber security system, wherein if I talk about information security system, we had limited entities. The security model was not mature, and there was not a requirement of having solutions which should have immensely powerful security intelligence, right? But when we talk about today's world, everything is connected. Every digital state is talking to each other. Users can use any device. On that particular device, they can access any application. They can download or they can upload any kind of data, right? They can be anywhere across the globe. They can be working from home, they can be working from cafe, they can be working from office. Every single digital state is connected, right? I would like to explain this with one more example, and that is think about a use case wherein I have an employee who is using a mobile phone and he's using Teams. Now, let's say that he tries to download any confidential document that's been sent to that particular user. Now, when that document is getting saved on the device, is there any protection? Is there any security aspect which will get triggered or not? Okay. And if you talk about the digital states, as of now, there are three digital states that you have to keep in mind. The first one is the user identity itself. You have to make sure that the identity remains secure. Then, what kind of application that particular user is using. Then, whether the device that the user is using is secured or not. And obviously, what kind of service the user is trying to access, right? Now think about the same scenario wherein the same employee invited one of my customer to, to be a part of, let's say, a channel in Microsoft Teams, right? And that Microsoft Teams channel where this customer has been added as a guest user has some of the documents that's been saved in my internal OneDrive, right? Now, how do I make sure that all the document that this particular customer is downloading stays protected? Or what kind of data protection strategies I have, right? Now think about like this. It is a ever expanding landscape or it is an ever expanding portfolio wherein we are living as of now. The devices that the users can use, there is no limit. The application that the users can use, there is no limit, right? So having a strategy wherein you are blocking known sources will no longer exist. You cannot trust any application because even the trusted application which your enterprise has created, the user may be accessing that application on an untrusted device altogether, right? So to make it easy from a security perspective, all these entities have been subcategorized into six digital states. The first one is identity. That means the user object, the identity of the user. Then you have endpoints. It could be any device. Then you have data. What kind of data the user is creating? Is it a general information or is it a confidential information? What kind of applications user is using, how many security standards, how many compliance standards that particular application is adhering to, whether that particular application can have identity outsourced to my own identity and access management system or not. Then you have the security for your entire infrastructure and network layer. Okay, so these are the six digital states which are actually being defined from a security perspective, and Microsoft has zero trust security strategies to make sure everything remains secure. So in a nutshell, If I talk about Microsoft Zero Trust Security, these are the design principles which you can adhere to. These are the implementation principles which you can adhere to, which is basically a combination of all the security solutions which Microsoft has to offer by giving you the authority to make sure that every entity, starting from user to the device that they use to the application that they access, the data that they generate, everything remains secure. And this entire Microsoft Zero Trust security strategy works on three different principles. The first one is verify explicitly. Okay, now it doesn't matter which user is coming from which location. Every request has to be audited, and for every request, there should be an authorization model, right? Then you should also follow the concept of least privilege. Every entity should only have that amount of access which is required. No more additional ports to be open for either inbound or outbound connectivity on any of the endpoints. None of the users should have any unauthorized access. There should be a concept of privileged identity management to be in place all the time. I'm just giving you some of the examples, but this is a ever expanding landscape and I will try to cover as much as possible. Okay. The third one is the most important one, and which is assume breach. Now, what does this actually means? That you should have security strategies in place that can help you recover your enterprise if there is any compromise which is going to happen. And you should also create boundaries in terms of your network layer, in terms of your infrastructure. Now, what does this technically mean? That let's say there is a compromise that is happening in some of your sites, or at, let's say, at some of the network layer. We have to make sure that network layer or these entities are separated enough so that the impact that has been made on one digital state should not reach the other digital state altogether. Okay, so if I talk about Microsoft's story, or if I talk about Microsoft's principles in terms of protecting every digital state, there are different solutions which are working in conjunction to make sure that you can attain Microsoft Zero Trust security. Okay, and let's start from the identity part itself. When we talk about identity, it's Azure Active Directory, which is offering you almost all the capabilities which any IDAM solution has to offer, starting from conditional access, MFA, self-service password reset, access management, identity lifecycle, Azure AD identity protection, user or session-based risk, right? And it's it's not only about the cloud identities that you are securing, right? We also have to make sure that every entity or every user account that exists in your on-prem identity or in your on-prem identity management should also be secured. And for that, you have Microsoft Defender for Identity, which was commonly known as Azure ATP. Right now, Microsoft Defender for Identity is actually a solution that can help you understand if there is any anomaly that's happening in your on-prem environment, right? And now let's talk about the other digital state, which is the endpoint, right? We all know the power of Microsoft Endpoint Manager portal and how it has combined the management of all the devices from one single pane altogether. But when we talk about endpoint protection, we have Microsoft Defender for Endpoints, which was initially known as Microsoft Defender ATP, right? So from an identity perspective, you have solutions which can make sure your identities remain secure. From endpoint perspective, we have Microsoft Endpoint Manager and Microsoft Defender for Endpoints, which are closely binded with each other. And you can actually have a security model which makes sure that your endpoints remains secure, right? Now, if we talk about data, there are n number of features, but I have listed only two of them. The first one is Microsoft Information Protection, and you have Microsoft Cloud App Security, right? Now, with Microsoft Cloud App Security, all the policies when it comes to DLP that you will be creating in Office 365 can be expanded to your other applications as well, to the cross-platform applications as well. And this was something which was announced this year itself. Okay. Now, practically, it's not possible to list down all the features, but still, I'm trying to give you an idea that how multiple solutions are working in conjunction to make you attain a state wherein you can say that your enterprise is actually adhering to security architecture, which is zero trust. Okay. If we talk about app, anything that is either approved or not approved or that falls under the scope of shadow IT will be discovered by Microsoft Cloud App Security, because Microsoft Cloud App Security is tightly binded with Microsoft Defender for Endpoints, wherein Microsoft Defender for Endpoints helps to inject all the signals which are discovered on an endpoint. Okay, and then obviously you have Azure Active Directory to make sure that your application gets only the required access when it is trying to query any information through Microsoft Graph API. Okay, and it's not only about Microsoft Graph API. You can actually go ahead and protect your own APIs or the APIs that are designed by your enterprise, right? Then if we talk about architecture or infrastructure in a nutshell, any resource that exists on-prem or in your hybrid clouds can be onboarded to Azure Defender, right? Now, since we know that Azure Defender is a kind of service which is actually going to help you secure all kind of devices. Likewise, we have Azure Defender for servers, we have Azure Defender for IoT, we have Azure Defender for AKS, right? Similarly, if you guys have also heard about Azure Arc, it's a kind of an application or it's a kind of a service in a nutshell that will help you onboard the resources that exist on your hybrid cloud environments. That means the resource that exists either on your AWS instance or your GCP instance. And then if you talk about Azure Sentinel, a typical cloud native SIEM and SOAR solution that can help you analyze incidents, that can help you make sure you are adhering to mid-air attack strategies which are there, and that works in a conjunction in terms of providing you more insights of what you should do for your particular enterprise, right? Last but not the least, the network, the most important one. You can actually inject all the data that's generated by your network appliances into Azure Sentinel itself. And then obviously for some of the resources which you have in Azure, you can get them onboarded to Azure Defender itself. And obviously when we talk about VMs or some of the basic resources which are available with Azure itself, there is a lot more customization which can be done by NSGs itself. That means network security groups, right? So these are some of the very basic capabilities that I'm trying to highlight here. And my agenda is to make sure that when we talk about Microsoft Zero Trust Security Architecture or principle, everything is connected. You have to make sure that you have done the configuration in terms of using the best benefits that is possible with the unified intelligence of Microsoft itself. Okay, so if I would like to summarize, this is just the list of the technologies that are working in conjunction. I may have missed some of them, but I'll make sure that as we move on with this playlist, I'm going to cover each and every aspect for all these six digital states and how each and every technology has its own purpose in terms of making sure that you are improving your security posture. That means the overall security of your enterprise is getting improved day by day. Okay, and that's what typically falls under the category of Microsoft threat protection as well, which is actually a combination of multiple technologies, right? But when we talk about zero trust, again, and this is something which I'm going to highlight, that it's basically the principles that you have to follow. It's basically the architecture or security strategies that you have to create to make sure that your security expand across all these six digital states. Now I'm going to show you an image that's moreover available on a public documentation of Microsoft, and which is like Microsoft Zero Trust Security Maturity Model. Okay, I will be sharing that link in the description as well. Please go ahead and read that article. That will give you a lot more insights. But I'm going to spend around 2 minutes more in terms of explaining what exactly it means. Okay, so now if you combine everything that I have said, and if you will try to map all these capabilities with different products, it will become more relatable. Okay, so let's start from identities itself, the first digital state, wherein you can have identity provider capabilities in terms of securing identities, right? Now if I talk about Azure AD, we all know all the capabilities, but what we also know that Azure AD gives you the capability to have another identity provider onboarded as well, right? And then you have MFA, you have user and session risk policy as well, which is basically a native capability of Azure AD identity protection, right? Then if you talk about devices, it's Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which helps you define all the device risk and compliance or configuration policies. And then it's basically managing the device identity as well when it comes to inventory or when it comes to tracking what exactly going on in your enterprise with different set of devices altogether, right? Now this section that you see here is basically a section wherein you can have your own organization policies defined or guidelines defined on behalf of which you will be defining security strategies. But as I've said before, that any security solution that you use, be it Microsoft Defender for endpoints, be it Microsoft Defender for identity, be it Microsoft Defender for Office 365, all these security solutions are actually injecting all kind of security intelligence signals to Microsoft Security Intelligent Graph API, and that's what being powered with every solution when we talk about Microsoft, and that's what which Microsoft has, and it separates Microsoft from any of the solution provider when it comes to security. Okay, if we talk about data, Microsoft Information Protection has a suite of applications, a suite of services that can help you classify, protect, and encrypt your data, right? It can be Office 365 DLP, right? It can be AIP, or it can be sensitivity labels. I'm just taking some of the very common terms which I have already covered to make it more relatable, right? For apps, you have MCAS, you have Azure AD Application Proxy to add one more layer of authorization so that the conditional access should get triggered even for those applications which only have on-prem footprints, right? And then if we talk about infrastructure and network, we all know the capabilities of Azure Security Center and how it has grown or how it has been matured over the period of time, right? Last but not the least, the more visibility you have, the more intelligent actions your security solutions can take, right? And that's the reason why every signal that's getting captured by security solutions which Microsoft has to offer can get injected to Azure Sentinel altogether, right? So this was all about knowing how Microsoft Zero Trust principles or how Microsoft Zero Trust security strategies can help you secure all the six digital estates and how all the signals from these solutions are getting injected to one single API or one single intelligence console, which is also available for public consumption. That means as a developer, you can have different APIs called and you can query different set of information, right? So let's talk about a quick summary of what all we have discussed in this particular video. We have discussed about Microsoft Zero Trust, what are Zero Trust principle or strategies, how we have been transitioned from information security system to a cyber security system wherein we have to make sure every state remains secured. Okay, in the next video, I'm going to start with Microsoft Zero Trust strategies for identities. Okay, now, if you think that this channel is helping you to learn anything new, please feel free to subscribe and share this video with your technical community. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Bye bye.